Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And we start this week with the news that Bridgerton has been renewed for a second season.
Very exciting. Thank you to everyone that listened to our little Bridgerton special last week, in which we talked about how we hoped the second season would be about Anthony Bridgerton and Kate Sheffield, and that is exactly what it's going to be about. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm glad Netflix were listening. Yeah, it's very exciting. I'm excited to see how the series progresses with different leads.
And maybe this time next year we'll be able to do another Bridgerton special episode of the podcast.
Yeah. And I suppose the second most important thing that happened this week was the inauguration of President Biden.
Yeah, while that was going on this week, the British royals had some curious little staffing updates. Prince Charles and Prince William lost two of their key advisors in the last few days.
The Mail on Sunday revealed that Prince Charles's spin doctor, Julian Payne, was quitting after 5 years with the royal household to take up a new job at communications firm Edelman.
This report in the Mail noted that Julian Payne has been credited with boosting Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles' popularity, including encouraging them to use social media and getting Charles to be the first member of the royal family to embrace Zoom in lockdown.
What an achievement.
Like, honestly, honestly though, like, it's not that surprising. I think that this guy is leaving. You know, we've talked before about how salaries for royal aides are notoriously low compared to what those kind of people could earn in the corporate world. So,
Yeah.
You know, 5 years is a decent amount of time. But I do think it's still interesting that he has quit at a time when Prince Charles and Camilla's public image has taken a real beating following the fourth season of The Crown.
Yeah, maybe he's just like, I can't face doing this all over again. Zoom was really the jewel in my crown, and I've got no cards left to play. But meanwhile, Prince William, he also lost his top aide, Christian Jones, who you might remember became his private secretary after his predecessor, Simon Case, was poached by Boris Johnson, Prime Minister, 10 months ago.
Now, though, he is also leaving the royal household to join the private equity firm Bridgepoint as a partner, according to an exclusive in The Telegraph. They had a royal source who said, whereas Simon was credited with making the Duke a statesman, Christian has really helped them to steer them through their public-facing role during the pandemic. He's helped them to grow in confidence by gently pushing them out of their comfort zone.
And right, onto a disastrous train tour.
I mean, that's a pretty interesting way of putting it. But this guy, you might remember him because he was recruited by Kensington Palace as the Deputy Communications Secretary in December 2018. At the time, he was working for both Prince William and Kate Middleton and Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. But within 3 months, there was so much tension between these two couples that he moved to just work for the Cambridges as Will and Kate's Communications Secretary.
The newsletter Pop Bitch had an interesting note on this. They wrote that the departure is sad news for the Duke and Duchess, but it's probably even sadder for the Sun. Christian is BFFs with the paper's associate editor Dan Wootton, who has, completely coincidentally, we're sure, been responsible for a number of big insider scoops about the royals in recent times. So good. But that's probably all we'll say on that.
Yes. This news, though, broke on Tuesday night for Wednesday's papers in The Telegraph, and Tuesday was the same day that Christian Jones was named in court as being one of 4 royal aides who will be asked to give evidence in Meghan Markle's case against Associated Newspapers, publisher of the Mail on Sunday, over the publication of the letter that Meghan wrote to her father, Thomas Markle.
The lawyers representing Associated Newspapers are keen to counter claims that Meghan wrote the deeply painful letter herself. That's according to her team.
They claim that Christian Jones, as well as Kensington Palace's former communications secretary Jason Knauf, the Sussex's former spin doctor Sarah Latham, and their former private secretary Samantha Cohen were all consulted on the contents of this letter, suggesting that Meghan always intended for it to be made public.
A legal firm representing this so-called Palace 4, Addleshaw Goddard, wrote, "None of our clients welcomes his or her potential involvement in this litigation, which has arisen purely as the result of the performance of his or her duties in their respective jobs at the material time. This is particularly the case given the sensitivity of, and therefore discretion required in, their particular roles in the royal household. As you will appreciate, all our clients are bound by obligations of confidentiality to their former and or current employers. Nor does any of our clients wish to take sides in the dispute between your respective clients. Our clients are all strictly neutral. They have no interest in assisting either party to the proceedings."
That really stood out to me. I mean, it's so complicated. Like, these people don't work for Harry and Meghan anymore, obviously, but some of them still work for the Queen or for other royals.
Yeah.
So you can see what they mean by them being strictly neutral, but the idea that they don't want to take sides.
I know. You'd think, like, if you still work for the royals, you'd be being told to take another royal side, but apparently strict neutrality.
The Palace 4, as they're called, want a, quote, level playing field in the dispute and believe they can, quote, shed some light on how this letter was created and drafted, whether Meghan anticipated the letter becoming public, and if there was any collaboration by Meghan with the authors of the Finding Freedom biography.
And I suppose that kind of information is what might come to light if Meghan's case goes to a full trial.
But just to give you a little bit of background, in case you weren't following it this week, because there were some other things going on, this week there was a 2-day hearing before Judge Justice Warby, and just as a refresher, this case, as we know, centres around the Mail on Sunday's publication of a letter that Meghan wrote to Thomas Markle. She is suing the publisher, Associated Newspapers, for breach of privacy and copyright related to the publication of 5 articles featuring extracts from this letter, 3 by the Mail Online and 2 in the Mail on Sunday in February 2019. But Meghan has applied for a summary judgment, which is a legal step that would negate the need for witness evidence or this having to go to a full trial in autumn. And this application was heard over 2 days at the High Court this week.
Over Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, the interesting thing was that this was streamed to the public, so you could apply to attend remotely, obviously. I attended it, or attended parts of it, and told you about it afterwards. So we're just going to be talking a little bit about what I took notes of during the hearing, but mostly stuff that we've picked up from reports elsewhere.
I'm not one to back away from a fight.
It was such a strange experience. I hadn't sat in on a hearing before. Obviously, I hadn't sat in on a virtual hearing either, so I didn't really know what to expect. But, you know, nobody was wearing like wigs and robes or anything like that, and some of the people were presenting while they were sitting down, so it did have like a little bit more of an informal air. But obviously, it was still very much a formal proceeding.
Yeah, like, even though it didn't quite look like it does when you see it on a TV show, they still had those, like, funny lines like, "my learned friend" on the council and "my learned colleague," which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and you could see, like, the other participants in the meeting, and obviously it didn't say, like, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle or whatever, but I could see that 2 of their staff members were watching, and they must have been up fucking early because it started at 10:30am our time, which I think is like 4:30am for them.
Yeah, something like that at least, yeah.
And it went on till 4:30pm on Tuesday and after 5 on Wednesday. So, you know, we didn't watch the whole thing. We had some other stuff to do. But catching bits of it here and there was very interesting.
We did notice that there was a celebrity friend of Harry and Meghan listed in the attendees.
Yes. I'm not really sure what we are allowed to say about that, but it was exciting.
Very exciting.
The first day of this hearing saw Meghan's team setting out their arguments for why the case should get a summary judgment. And then the second day, Associated Newspapers gave their arguments as to why the case needs full investigation at trial. And then Meghan's team had a chance to rebut the arguments. But when it started, you know, like all video meetings. There was a sort of extended period of awkwardness with getting like the cameras and the microphones working, and I just hadn't expected that at all.
I really thought they'd have done like a trial run or something before it started. Felt like a bit of a shaky start, but they did get much better by the end. Well done. I'm obviously a legal expert and can judge these things.
I feel comfortable using legal jargon in everyday life. I object.
Did you like that he kept saying TMZ?
I absolutely loved that. I thought that was so funny.
Is that what you call it? No.
No.
You've been around me for too long. You just say TMZ.
I mean, I don't think any of our friends over here say TMZ, but I think that maybe that British distinction is one that's like a thing of the past now, unless you're speaking legalese. But the crux of the reasoning of Meghan's team is that there's no legitimate reason to publish someone's private correspondence without their permission, and that any further investigation would be a waste of time and money. And they argued that everything that the judge needs to know to make his decision, notably that the letter was a private one and that the newspaper had published large parts of it, was beyond reasonable dispute.
Yeah, and they said that the publication of the, quote, quintessentially private letter she sent to her father was a, quote, triple-barrelled invasion of her rights, that any argument to the contrary was smoke and mirrors and utterly fanciful. And Meghan's lawyer described the letter as a heartfelt plea from an anguished daughter, and that she sent it to Thomas Markle in a recorded delivery by FedEx via her accountant to minimise the risk of interception.
They also highlighted some previous case law, including a 2008 ruling in favour of Prince Charles and a 2017 ruling in favour of Paul Burrell, who was the former butler to Princess Diana. So Charles had successfully applied for a summary judgment when he sued the Mail on Sunday over the publication of a leaked journal in which he described the Chinese leadership as appalling old waxworks.
God.
Ugh. And Paul Burrell was awarded damages from Max Clifford, the late PR boss who had previously represented him in 2016 after he passed on private information to the News of the World.
Yeah, so two other little royal connections
Yeah.
there. But on the second day, Associated Newspapers got to set out their case that they were justified in publishing because A, the letter was not really meant to be private, and B, Meghan's friends had made misleading claims in public about what it said.
With those arguments in mind, counsel for the paper insisted that the matter could not be decided without hearing from people Meghan spoke to when writing the letter and the friends who spoke about it after it was sent.
Yeah, and this point kind of questions her rights under copyright law, which Associated Newspapers say were affected by the degree to which other people may have contributed to the letter in various ways. And there was this discussion of the Palace Four, like we mentioned earlier, and what role they might have had in drafting this letter, because Meghan's team argues that she is the sole author of the letter, that she spent many hours composing it on the Notes app on her phone, and that she just shared a draft of it with Prince Harry and Jason Knauf for support. Quote, as this was a deeply painful process that they had lived through with her, and because Mr. Knauf was responsible for keeping the senior members of the royal household apprised of any public-facing issues, the media spectacle surrounding Mr. Markle being one such issue, Mr. Knauf provided comments on the electronic draft in the form of general ideas as opposed to actual wording. But Associated Newspapers are suggesting that Meghan sought professional advice because she knew the letter would be made public.
They're saying that it was intended for use as part of a media strategy to enhance her image, and the lawyer said that there was no other good reason to discuss its contents with the Palace communications team.
Yeah, and I have to say I did sort of sit up when we were listening at the bit where he said, why were they involved at all in the wording of a letter if it was a wholly private letter? And they also said, no truly private letter from daughter to father would require any input from the Kensington Palace communications team.
Yeah, it's a kind of a thorny point, isn't it?
The Telegraph reported that Meghan has argued she simply wanted to follow royal protocol, but Associated Newspapers' lawyer told the court, we don't know what the protocol was. We've asked and not been told. We don't know why it was considered that the claimant's engagement with Mr. Markle's activities might be regarded as a public-facing issue.
All this stuff about royal protocol, it's like just fog, isn't it? No one can define it or really deal with it.
Another thing I thought was sort of striking in the Telegraph's reporting was that the editor of the Mail on Sunday, Ted Verity, said he'd been told by a senior member of the royal household that Sarah Latham, who now works for the Queen, had, quote, assisted the authors of Finding Freedom by performing a role that was essentially fact-checking to make sure the authors got nothing wrong. And he also claimed that a third member of Harry and Meghan's staff, a woman called Kelly, that would be Kelly Thomas Morgan at Sunshine Sachs, had been responsible for making calls to open doors to the authors of Finding Freedom. So I'm sure a lot of you will say, what has that to do with the publication of this letter? And that's for the judge to decide, but I just thought those were two notable little details that stood out to me.
We don't have any indication of what the judge's decision might be at this point. He said he'll take 2 weeks to work on a draft judgment, which will then be published at a later date. He did ask more questions of the Associated Newspapers team than he did of Meghan's team, but it's not really clear whether that's like a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, I think you saw that on Byline Investigates, right? They had a comment piece reflecting on the hearing and the three possible outcomes. So, first possible outcome is that the judge could rule in favour of Meghan on both main parts of the claim, that would be the privacy and copyright claims, in which case she would receive damages and the proceedings would probably be at an end. So that would be the summary judgment. The second possible outcome is that the judge could find in her favour on one part of the claim, in which case Meghan might either decide to proceed to trial on the remainder of the claim, or she might be content with the fact the paper has been shown to have broken the law and so drop the remainder of her claim. Or there's the third possible outcome, which is that the judge might dismiss the application for summary judgment completely and find that Associated Newspapers has raised sufficient factual issues to require a trial, in which case, assuming Meghan doesn't decide to throw in the towel, the whole matter would go for a full trial in the autumn.
And something that they point out is really important to remember is that even in this third case, with it going to a full trial, that doesn't mean that the Mail on Sunday have won or that Meghan has lost. It just means that basically the whole thing's going to take a lot longer. It's not judgment on the outcome of this dispute. It's just whether or not we have to hear from the witnesses in order to help make up the judge's mind.
I'm sure it'll be presented in a rather different way.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's why you kind of have to keep that in mind, because as Byline point out, anything other than a complete victory for Meghan will be reported as a defeat.
But as well as that, this is going to go on for a long time. Like Byline points out, that the Mail on Sunday have a habit of dragging legal matters out, and even if the judge rules in Meghan's favour, you can expect them to appeal the decision. So this is going to go on and on and on. But for now, we will be waiting for any update on the summary judgment. He said it will probably take about 2 weeks, but it could take a little bit longer than that before it's made public.
Also this week, while this was going on, Prince Harry did an interview with The Fast Company, which is a publication that he wrote an essay for last year about urging companies to withhold advertising from online platforms that contribute to a crisis of hate, crisis of health, and a crisis of truth, to use his words.
Yeah, and in this week's interview, he spoke about the incident at the US Capitol earlier this month, which he described as a literal attack on democracy in the United States, organised on social media, which is an issue of violent extremism.
He said, "We're losing loved ones to conspiracy theories, losing a sense of self because of the barrage of mistruths, and at the larger scale, losing our democracies."
I do have to say that it is always hard for me to take a member of a hereditary monarchy seriously when they're talking about threats to democracy.
Yeah.
So I was rolling my eyes hard at these quotes. And it just made me think again that why doesn't he just hand back his title and cut all ties? Like, if he had a much clearer divorce from the monarchy and what the monarchy stands for, given that he's so eager to weigh in on issues of democracy, he would be in a slightly better position to do that if he didn't have all of the vestiges of the monarchy hanging off him when he's quoted Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. For fuck's sake.
Yeah, absolutely. It would make his position so much stronger to do that.
I mean, not so much stronger, a little bit stronger. I think we're always going to be a little bit of eyebrow raise when he's lecturing people on threats to democracy, given his background.
Yeah.
But that's one thing he could do to make it a little less egregious.
I was surprised at how eloquently he spoke in this piece about these issues.
and I was suspicious about how eloquently he spoke in this piece. This is almost certainly an email interview, right? There is no way he was speaking like this on the phone or in any kind of live conversation. This was back and forth. He had to have been able to get some help.
Absolutely, yeah. I
his
agree.
team in composing these responses. That being said, I do think it's clear that he has been listening to the academics and the researchers and the policymakers in this space that they've been speaking to in the last year or two.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I liked most about the piece. Because I think, like, if he could do an in-person interview where he spoke like this, I'd be super impressed and, you know...
Stunned.
Stunned, yeah. It would go against, like, pretty much everything I have in my mind about Harry if he was able to come out with this stuff off the top of his head. But in how he's talked about the experts, I felt like it really, like, blows the Cambridges out of the water. Most recently, we've heard about how it's no exaggeration to describe Kate as an expert in early years studies, and...
Maybe if you gave her an email interview and let her get her team to help her write up some answers, she'd sound like a fucking expert.
But that's why I'm like, I can't believe Kate's team haven't come up with something like this. Because, you know, I really think this was like a, you know, maybe masterful is a little bit strong. Because,
a little bit.
Well, but because you can definitely see, like, that it's probably not Harry coming up with this. But this piece does, like, serve to quite well kind of consolidate Archwell's position on the internet and social media, and it does help to, I think, crystallize some of the more abstract terms that Harry and Meghan have been talking in about, like, compassion online. I think it, like, demonstrates some of the research or people that they've been, like, talking to, and I like that they take the time to say that basically Harry and Meghan aren't experts in this, but they talk to a lot of experts, which I feel like is, you know, a play that they haven't used for the Cambridges. They're trying to make Will and Kate into experts in the things that they're talking about when they clearly aren't.
There were a couple of moments where Harry talked about more personal aspects of all this that I thought we could mention. Like, he spoke about the misinformation in reporting around him and Meghan. He said, "I was really surprised to witness how my story had been told one way, my wife's story had been told one way, and then our union sparked something that made the telling of that story very different. That false narrative became the mothership for all of the harassment you're referring to. It wouldn't have even begun had our story just been told truthfully." I don't know if you could say they wouldn't have suffered any harassment at all.
Yeah, that seems like perhaps wishful thinking and the power of truth. I think this was unfortunately slightly inevitable. And he was asked about their approach to social media. He said, "It's funny you should ask, because ironically we woke up one morning a couple of weeks ago to hear that a Rupert Murdoch newspaper said that we were evidently quitting social media. That was news to us, bearing in mind that we have no social media to quit, nor have we for the past 10 months. We will revisit social media when it feels right for us, perhaps when we see more meaningful commitments to change or reform. But right now we've thrown much of our energy into learning about this space and how we can help."
Yeah, we saw this story, it was in the Sunday Times, about how they had quit social media.
Yeah.
Quite striking to me that he's referring to the Sunday Times, the British paper of record, as a Rupert Murdoch newspaper.
I mean, factually correct, but, like, in kind of grouping them in with all the tabloids, that's, a very strong statement.
But, you know, we will revisit social media when it feels right for us. We haven't seen the last of Meghan Markle on Instagram.
Or Harry on TikTok. But what about quote of the week?
I saw this one during the week and I thought it might be worth chatting about. This was an interview that the author Bernardine Evaristo did with the Evening Standard. She wrote the Booker Prize winning novel Girl, Woman, Other, which is excellent. That's
so
the
good.
one that tied with Margaret Atwood's The Testament. Fucking disgraceful. Anyway, she was asked about accepting an honour, an OBE, on the Queen's Honours list, and other people of colour choosing not to accept them because of their links to empire. And she said, "They are old-fashioned terms and they need to change them, but I'm happy to accept these recognitions as a national honour. Also, my argument is, what does it look like if we don't accept them? If Black and Asian authors don't, then they become white honours for white British people, and that goes right up to people becoming dames and entering the House of Lords. We continue our exclusion from certain levels of participation in society, and I think that would be sad."
I think I could speak for both of us when I say that we believe everyone should be rejecting these titles.
I mean, this honour system just shouldn't exist anymore.
Yeah. But her point, while I don't wholeheartedly agree with everything, it does serve as a pretty stark reminder that we shouldn't only be calling on people of colour to hand back titles or refuse them in the first place, and that it's white people's responsibility to dismantle these relics of an imperial past that continue to benefit white people.
Yeah, we need more Michael Sheens.
Yeah, I mean, even Michael Sheen, who handed back his honour 9 years or something after, he didn't speak up about it at the time. It was only 3 years after he handed it back that he spoke publicly about it. So we need more white people very loudly saying that they don't agree with these titles.
We have another quote of the week, though, right? This one I thought you would particularly enjoy.
So this is Prince Charles writing to volunteers at the Red Squirrel Survival Trust on, of course, Red Squirrel Appreciation Day. He said, "These charming and intelligent creatures never fail to delight. I take enormous pleasure in having them around, and in the house when I'm at home in Scotland. They are such inquisitive and delightful characters. They've even been known to hunt down a few of their favourite nuts left out in an unguarded jacket pocket." This is crazy.
It's just so, whimsical.
Yeah.
Whimsical Prince Charles. With his little squirrels roaming around his house and eating nuts out of his pockets. It's so funny.
So good. And I am reminded as well of the Queen inviting the bats into Balmoral and all these royals who just have these wildlife infested homes. What about Fit for a Queen?
Well, I did want to talk about Kate Middleton this week because she did a Zoom. One Zoom singular this week. Bravo, Kate. Where she chatted to nurses from the University Hospitals Coventry and Warwickshire NHS Trust on Thursday to hear about their work and thank them for their efforts. It was a nice call, actually. One of the nurses was talking about how the patient's partner had asked them to sing Bon Jovi and hold their hand. And that was a nice sort of tender moment. Kate, however, was wearing a black blazer with a white open collar blouse. None of them have been identified. She also had on those faux pearl Simone Rocha earrings that we like. But the main notable part of this appearance was her hair.
I liked how the Mail described it, saying her brunette locks cascaded over her left shoulder.
I mean, they certainly did, Tom.
Yeah, so this was described as her very long hair, and it's proof that she hasn't been getting secret lockdown haircuts. According to celebrity hairstylist James Johnson, this straighter, fuss-free style indicates that Kate is setting an example by doing her own hair and letting her style grow out.
I do think she looked great. I much prefer when she has her hair like this than when she's got, the whole sausage curl brigade going on.
Yeah.
I thought it was notable as well where she was zooming from. This was a different background to what we've seen before, and it turns out that it was not Anmar Hall, it was Sandringham. That the Queen has allowed Prince William and Kate use of Sandringham, which is very near to Anmar Hall, as their office while they're working from home.
I mean, I guess it's good because the place would otherwise be empty, but I do feel like this is yet another crack in the Cambridge's, we're so relatable kind of front that we just pop into the next door stately home to do our work.
Before going back to our own stately home.
Yeah.
I go to this other stately home to make one Zoom call a week. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see if they continue to Zoom from Sandringham.
Oh, yeah. What about first in line?
I think I'm going to hand it to Prince William this week because I think he did a very successful job of burying that quite curious staffing update we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It reminded me of when celebrities announce they're getting divorced on a Friday evening.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about, we heard so many stories about Harry and Meghan losing staff over the years. And anytime a member of their team left, there was this very predictable series of stories about how impossible they are to work with. In particular, Meghan, Duchess, difficult, the demanding diva, sending 5 a.m. emails, making staffers' lives so impossible that they had to quit.
Yeah, all that fucking bullshit every time.
Yeah, especially if it was somebody who'd been working with them for less than a year, like Christian Jones was only there for 10 months. And yet all the reporting on this was very straightforward, I thought.
Yeah, even Camilla Tominey, royal reporter at The Telegraph, said in her newsletter, "Having covered the royals for nearly 16 years, I've seen plenty of household staff come and go, and, of course, the latest departures are no different."
Yeah, before mentioning, and, you know, some of them, like Meghan, make their lives very difficult by sending 5 a.m. emails. But it just seems like, you know, we're not used to seeing the royals burying stories like this, and doing so on the eve of the presidential inauguration in America was a savvy little move, and one I don't think we had expected from them.
Yeah. So next week, we're going to take a break, but we are planning a special episode on Camilla.
By popular demand. So many people have asked us, Tom, why do you like Camilla Parker Bowles so much? I would love for you to explain yourself. So Tom has ordered himself some books. He's getting ready to deep dive. And on top of that, though, you know, we can expect that the next few months are going to be very quiet for the royals until the 1 year review, which reports this week say might not even be going ahead. There is not going to be a whole lot going on. So if you have any suggestions of any topics you would like to hear more about, or any like book club suggestions or TV club recommendations, you know, it'd be great to hear some ideas.
Yeah, I enjoyed doing our barely regal Bridgerton special. So even if there's just a very tenuous royal link, we're pretty open to all considerations.
Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you have a great week.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
So I'd say the ball's in your court, but the truth is your balls are in my fist. Now, I apologize if that image is too pansy for you, but I'm comfortable enough with my manhood to put it out there. Now get your ass in there and close the goddamn deal.